Hey everybody, welcome to this week's edition of Table Talk. I'm sitting here with Aaron and my name is Jason. And wherever you're watching from, please let us know. We want to be as engaging as possible. One thing that Aaron and I both really miss about being at the sites every single week is seeing your guys' faces and having one-on-one conversations. So as much conversation as we can start in the comments, the better. So start typing away.
Jump in.
And so what did we learn last week?
Well, last week we looked at Acts chapters 13 through 20, got into Paul's ministry, and really looked at how he suffered a lot of persecution for that in the first century. But there was a lot of people captivated by Paul's message. All right, and they started forming these Jesus communities that were transformed by God's Spirit into new kinds of people. And a pretty amazing thing. And so we asked y'all, we gave a couple challenges on being one of those transformed communities. And so we asked you, are you part of a community that is transformed by God's Spirit to share the good news? And we know our Feed the Need community, we want to be transformed by that and to do that. So we asked, are you a part of a community that's sharing the good news? And we challenge you to go out and share the good news. And again, when you go out, you're going to receive the same kind of responses Paul did. Hopefully some good ones. Maybe some people say, I don't care. And you might once in a while run into somebody who's not very happy with what you're doing. But even if you ran into one of those, were you blessed by that? And I think you'll find out that when we go and when we share, there are going to be some people say yes. There are going to be some people who don't care. There are going to be some people who are not happy with us. But that main thing is we're going to be blessed by being obedient to what God has called us to do.
And if you find yourself outside of one of those communities that's being transformed by Jesus and you going out and telling people about it, pray about that. We all need to be surrounded with people that hold us accountable to do that. And the only way to do that is to be surrounded with those that are pursuing the same things. And so to find a community, come join Feed the Need, even if it's online right now. But a lot of churches right now, we have the luxury of everybody is online. So there's a Bible-believing church that is professing the gospel and sending people out. Go look up one of those. And you guys are more than welcome to email us, especially if you're in the Texas area. We have lots of recommendations, and they're all different. And so, but we definitely encourage you to be a part of that.
Amen. So what we're going to do now is go in and look at the final section of the book of Acts here, chapters 21 through 28. So let's go to the video.
We've been exploring the book of Acts, which was written by a man named Luke as a continuation of the Gospel of Luke. Acts began with Jesus telling his followers to spread the good news about his kingdom.
And they would start in Jerusalem, then go out into the neighboring regions, and from there to the ends of the earth.
Now, in Jerusalem, their message was received by many and opposed by many, especially by the leaders of the temple. They were scandalized by this new claim that the whole story of Israel had been fulfilled by Jesus' life, death, and resurrection.
One of these leaders was a man named Saul of Tarsus, who worked tirelessly to stop the movement. That is, until he met the risen Jesus himself. And this encounter transformed Saul from an enemy of Jesus into a herald of his kingdom.
And so for years, he traveled about the Roman Empire using his Roman name, Paul, starting Jesus communities all over.
And one of Paul's greatest desires was that all of these diverse communities would see themselves as one unified people, regardless of their differences, Jew or non-Jew, male or female, slave or free.
Jesus was creating one unified family of equals living together under his rule.
And this brings us to the final section of Acts. Back in Jerusalem, where the movement began, the Jewish followers of Jesus were suffering from a drought and food shortage.
And Paul was so passionate about the church's unity that he began a major fundraising project among the diverse churches he had started. They would pool their money together so he and a group of representatives could take it as a relief gift to Jerusalem.
But it's not safe for Paul in Jerusalem. The Jewish leaders there dislike him so much, they want him dead.
And Paul knew he was walking into a trap. His friends all begged him not to go, but no one could stop him.
And why would Paul risk his life to bring this gift? Couldn't he have sent someone else?
Well, for Paul, this was personal. Jerusalem was where he used to participate in the murder of Jesus' followers, and now he gets to serve them. It's also where Jesus himself was executed, and so for Paul, it would be an honor to suffer there alongside his king.
Paul goes to Jerusalem, and as expected, he's found by his enemies. A mob forms and they try to kill him. But Roman soldiers save his life by taking him into custody.
The Jewish leaders are accusing Paul of starting a revolt against Rome, but they can't prove it.
And the Romans don't know what to do with him.
Yeah, they can see Paul's not a criminal, but his claim that a crucified Jewish man is the risen king of the world, it keeps getting him into trouble.
And so Paul gets transferred from one court to another until he demands that his case be tried before the court of Caesar in Rome. And so they happily ship him off.
Now, throughout this section of Acts, Luke, the writer of the story, has portrayed Paul's trials and imprisonments so that they resemble his previous stories of Jesus' trials and imprisonment. Luke's making an important point. When the people of Jesus follow the way of Jesus, their stories will begin to look like his story, which is beautiful, but it also comes with a cost.
On the way to Rome, the boat carrying Paul is hit by a violent storm, and everyone freaks out.
Except for Paul. He's below deck hosting a meal, just like Jesus did the night before his trial. Paul blesses and then breaks the bread, promising that God is with them through this storm. And the next day, the ship hits and then breaks apart on the rocks, but everyone's washed safely ashore.
Which is amazing, but Paul's not out of trouble. He's taken to Rome and put under house arrest.
But it's not so bad. In his house, he can host groups of Jews and non-Jews, sharing with them the good news about Jesus, the risen king.
This is a bold move in Rome, the center of power where Caesar rules the world as king.
Yes, you have Jesus' alternative upside-down kingdom, now growing in the very heart of the world's most powerful empire, all through the suffering of a prisoner. And with this contrast between kingdoms, Luke ends his story.
That's a great image, but the story's supposed to be about this message spreading to the ends of the earth. So shouldn't it continue?
Of course, Luke has left the story open-ended on purpose, so that his readers would know that the story isn't over, and that they can participate in Jesus' kingdom that is still spreading to this day.
So that last video was over Acts 21 through the end of Acts. And so this is the part where Paul's on his third and final missionary journey to Jerusalem. And he knows as he goes into Jerusalem that there are people there that don't like him. Those are those angry people we were talking about that are basically saying, I don't like what you're doing. And so what ends up happening, luckily for Paul, he actually gets captured by the Romans who are over Jerusalem. They technically save his life. Technically. But then through a long process, the Romans didn't know what to do with him. Kind of exactly how it was with Jesus. They didn't know what to do, so went through a bunch of different courts. And so he ends up in Rome. And so that takes us kind of to where our discussion begins today.
Yeah, he's actually in a launching pad to share the gospel. This is the most powerful city in the world at that time. And so now there's an opportunity for him to, through this city, launch an upside down theology
exactly.
to all nations. So a couple of discussion questions that we have for you. Why was going back to Jerusalem going to be dangerous for Paul?
Yeah, so previous missionary journeys, he'd obviously created a name for himself. And so, and Jerusalem is one of those big cities where a lot of people that he's even come in contact with in other cities are there. And they don't like this one God above all other gods. They were all content and happy with having their multiple gods and so-called living in harmony with each other. And so now you've got this guy that is turning the world upside down, right? Through Jesus. And so,
right. And supposed to be through a Jew.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Jewish leaders are none too happy with this whole thing.
Even the own religion, right? Like it's like the home religion, and they don't even like it. And so there's just persecution waiting for him in Jerusalem. So
his persecution in Jerusalem, how was Paul's persecution in Jerusalem like Jesus's persecution? His last days, okay? Jerusalem wasn't good for him either.
No.
Okay, in a human sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Actually, in a human sense, it's pretty great. What he did for
great for us.
But persecution-wise, how is Paul's situation going into Jerusalem like Jesus' situation going into Jerusalem?
Yeah, they completely mirror each other, even in the way the scriptures are written. And so you have, Jesus we'll start just with the garden. There was a lot before that, but, praying the night before, like, take this from me. He already knew it was going to happen. And so, sure enough, Roman guards come, take him, and then, begins that whole walk to the cross. And they didn't understand. It was the Christians at that time that did believe in the Bible and what the Old Testament said, but they didn't recognize that Jesus was right in front of them. And so they beat him because they were scared of it, and they didn't want to accept it because they had already had their old way of life.
So he's falsely accused, bounced around from court to court, okay, beaten, okay, and finally dealt with by the Romans. Look at the mirroring, that we have with Jesus' life here. So then he gets sent to Rome, okay? And how is Paul's house arrest in Rome surprisingly good for the gospel? You would think, okay, he's being dragged out from the center of the theological center of the world and being brought to Rome, okay? Jews think he's out of their hair. They're going to deal with it. But how is it actually good for the gospel?
Well, one stipulation they didn't put on Paul was who he could and could not talk to and who could and could not come into the house. And so they literally gave him free rein to invite as many people as he wanted to from all different religions and all different parts of power into the house, and they came.
Yeah, and it actually protected him.
Yeah.
They actually protected him.
Yep.
Okay, it's just you can't leave, but have at it.
Yeah.
And so you have the world's most powerful people from all different nations in this place. They're hearing what he has to say. This is a launching pad for the gospel, and only God would think of doing something this way.
Right.
All right. Let's look forward. Here's the point, what we want you to get. When you follow the way of Jesus, your story will begin to look like Jesus. Look how Paul's story started. And he was a Jewish theologian, okay, as far away from Jesus as he could get. He makes the turn, and his life becomes almost exactly like Jesus' life. So when we follow the way of Jesus, our story will begin to look like Jesus' story. So here's a question for everybody. At some point, how has your story looked like Jesus' story or Paul's story? Okay? Have you been blessed by sharing the gospel? Paul was certainly blessed by sharing the gospel. At the same time, have you been persecuted for the sake of the gospel?
And so,
all right? If you're really out there sharing, every once in a while you're going to run into one or two, right?
Yep.
Okay, that are going to try to persecute you. Well, that only happens if you're out there sharing.
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
And so, and if you're wondering on how to share the good news, like I think that's where a lot of people stumble and struggle is like, okay, well, I don't know how to share the good news. Well, how is it shared with you? What did Jesus do in your life? What people did he use? And that's a great starting point. Like share your own story and begin practicing. I practiced telling Aaron how Jesus came into my life. And that's a great way to start being able to share your testimony.
Yeah. And to help you out, if you're not sure how to share your story, you come back next week and we're going to take you step by step in a super simple, easy way of how you can share your story with others. I don't want you to miss it. Invite your friends, be here for that. And in the meantime, let us know the sharing interactions that you've had over the last few weeks. What has happened? We want to see if there's a movement of the gospel, a movement of the Spirit, a movement of Jesus transforming people's lives into new people wherever you are. So continue making that list of people you can share with. Come back next week. We're going to take you step by step, super simple way, how to share your story. We just want you to be active for Jesus, showing our love and obedience to him.
And so for the rest of this week, go ahead and finish out the book of Acts and see kind of the interesting thing is it gets left open.
And believe it or not, next week we're going to look at Acts chapter 29.
Just like last week, our core value is again simplicity. The more we complicate ministry, the more we get in the way. Keep to the heart of ministry by feeding people physically and spiritually. Matthew 6:33 says, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and these things will be added unto you." Our focus is just to be on him, and he will show us where to go.